Did you grow up thinking that Christopher Columbus was the first European to step foot in the Americas? Well, that's what I was told at school. But, turns out, that's a big lie. Almost half a millennia before Columbus and his fleet from Spain arrived in what is now the Bahamas in 1492, another group of Europeans had already stepped foot, and left their mark, in what is now Canada. The Vikings. I'm Madam Archaeologist, your go-to informant on everything archaeology, and in this episode, I'll dive into Viking adventures in North America and show you an undeniable archaeological discovery that proves the Vikings were there in the 11th century AD. The Vikings were expert marine explorers, the undisputed masters of the seas, navigating the North Sea and beyond in their longships. From their homeland in Scandinavia, they plundered and settled in areas near and far, including England, Scotland, Ireland, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, some parts of mainland Europe, most likely the Azores, and even what is now eastern Canada. I'll go over the textual evidence briefly, since it gives a lot of context. So, the Saga of the Greenlanders recounts the discovery of 3 lands west of Greenland, called Helluland, which means land of flat rocks. This land was supposedly icy and barren. Markland, meaning forest land, and finally Vinland, which means land of wine. The saga starts with recounting the Norse colonization of Greenland by Eric the Red, and then moves on to 6 Viking expeditions taken to those 3 lands beyond. Key players are Bjarni, the 3 brothers Leif, Torvald, and Thorstein, their sister Freydis, Thorstein's wife Gudrid, and Gudrid's later husband Thorfinn. According to the saga, Bjarni was an Icelandic explorer, and he and his crew accidentally discovered the lands in question during a voyage to Greenland, but they never stepped foot on them. Leif heard about this, decided to buy a ship from Bjarni, and sailed to those lands himself with a crew of 35 men. Leif made it, making him the first European to step foot in the Americas, and he was credited with naming the 3 lands Helluland, Markland, and Vinland. Leif and his crew set up a camp in Vinland from which they ventured beyond. They then returned to Greenland with timber and lots of grapes. But Leif never journeyed back to Vinland again. Instead, his brother Torvald sailed to the new lands next and explored a bit. But he was sadly killed by natives there. His crew, however, was left unwounded and they made it back to Greenland. The next attempted expedition to Vinland was undertaken by Leif's other brother, Thorstein, and his wife Gudrid. But they never made it, ending up somewhere in Greenland instead. Thorstein died there, and the next expedition was undertaken by Gudrid and her new husband, Thorfinn. They made it to Vinland, and Thorfinn and his crew traded with some of the natives there. This started out peacefully, but after one of the natives tried to grab the Vikings' weapons, at least that's the story told in the saga, he was killed and the Vikings prepared for battle. The Vikings came out victorious, stayed there for the winter, and returned to Greenland the following spring. The last expedition was made by Freydis, who struck a deal with 2 brothers named Helgi and Finnbogi, and sailed with them to Vinland, agreeing that they should share equally all the goods that they would acquire over there. But, as the saga recounts, she betrayed them, lied to her husband that they had mistreated her, and had the 2 brothers killed alongside their entire crew. She did that before returning to Greenland. Why did she do it? I have no idea. Viking explorations of Helluland, Markland, and Vinland are also recounted in the Saga of Eric the Red, albeit a bit differently, but the idea is the same. That the Vikings made it to these 3 lands, had terrible encounters with the natives, and gave up their attempt at colonization. Now, in 1960, a Viking encampment was found at the northernmost tip of Newfoundland, called Meadows, and it's likely to have been the base camp in Vinland. This is the only confirmed Viking site in the Americas at the moment. Excavations revealed 8 turf structures that looked to be Icelandic in style, and objects made from stone, bone, glass, bronze, and iron were also found, alongside waste from activities that the Vikings engaged in, like ironworking, woodworking, and repairing or constructing boats. How do we know that this was a Viking base camp? Well, there's not only the style of the turf buildings, but also a spindle whorl, a stone lamp, and a bronze pin were definitely made by Viking hands. Radiocarbon dating initially gave a date between the late 10th century and the early 11th for the short occupation of the site, while more recent dating has given us an exact year of 1021. This fits with the time period that the sagas recount. Whether the adventures recounted in the sagas actually took place the way they were explained is beyond us, but it's fascinating to ponder that Vikings were once in Canada, exploring and interacting with the natives. The most important thing about the finding of the Lance or Meadows base camp is that it confirms the main theme of the sagas, that the Vikings did indeed venture west of Greenland. The Vikings were excellent storytellers, but unfortunately they don't appear to have been very good cartographers because we don't have any maps that would help us specifically locate the three lands beyond. Some people think that Newfoundland is Vinland, especially since the Viking camp was found there. But based on the saga of the Greenlanders, Vinland would have had to have been a place where grapes grew natively, before the arrival of the Europeans after Columbus. Grapes don't grow natively in Newfoundland, but they do in other parts of eastern Canada. One theory is that the Vikings mistook wild berries for grapes. This seems likely, or perhaps they ventured a bit further than we think, but the only problem with this latter theory would be that Newfoundland is an island cut off from the rest of Canada. So for now, the most likely theory appears to be that the Vikings mistook wild berries for grapes. Anyways, if we look at a modern map, North America looked largely the same 1,000 years ago as it does today. We can see what appear to be, if you're looking from the perspective of the Atlantic Ocean, 3 clearly defined lands. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. That's it for this episode. I hope you found it interesting and learned something beyond conventional history. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more cool content by your go-to informant on everything archaeology, Madam Archaeologist.